Every phone call in America in 1970 ran through copper wire. That wire was strung by one man on a wooden pole, 30 feet up, working with whatever he could carry on his belt. If it wasn't on him when he started climbing, it wasn't coming. This is everything he carried. Subscribe before we start. Number 15, hard hat. Fiberglass, not plastic. Wide brim to shed rain and keep the sun off his neck. In the trade, they called it a lid. The hard hat was the first thing on in the morning and the last thing off at night. It wasn't just head protection. In 1970, a lineman worked under energized power lines, falling branches, and tools dropped by the man working above him. The hard hat was the one piece of equipment that protected him from things he couldn't see coming. Number 14, hand line. A coil of half-inch manila rope carried over one shoulder or clipped to the belt. The lineman climbed the pole with nothing but his body gear. When he reached the top, he dropped one end of the hand line to his groundman below. The groundman tied on the tool pouch, the cable spool, the crossarm hardware, whatever was needed for the job. The lineman hauled it up hand over hand. This is the detail most people miss about the trade. Climbing the pole was a solo act. Getting the work up the pole was a two-man operation. Without a groundman, the lineman couldn't do his job. Number 13, gaffs. L-shaped steel spikes about 3 inches long, mounted on steel shanks that strapped to the lineman's boots with leather cuffs. He kicked the spikes into the wooden pole and walked straight up. Left foot, right foot, alternating kicks, leaning back against his strap with each step. The only thing holding him to the pole at any given moment was the depth of one spike in the wood. If a gaff cut out, if the spike slipped or tore through rotten wood or hit a knot, the lineman slid down the pole or fell away from it entirely. Gaff cutouts were the most common injury in the trade. A man could go from 30 feet up to the ground in less than 2 seconds, and the pole tore up everything it touched on the way down. Number 12, body belt. A thick leather belt about 4 inches wide, worn around the waist over the work clothes. D-rings riveted to each hip for attaching the safety strap. Tool loops and snap hooks for carrying equipment. The body belt was the lineman's anchor point, his tool rack, and his work positioning device, all in one piece of leather. Everything else, the pouch, the strap, the pliers, the test set, hung from this belt. A lineman's belt was custom fitted, broken in over years of climbing, and most men bought their own rather than use a company-issued one that didn't fit their body. Number 11, safety strap. A leather strap about 6 feet long with a steel snap hook on each end. The lineman wrapped it around the pole, hooked both ends to the D-rings on his body belt, and leaned back. His weight pulled the strap tight against the wood, and that friction was what held him in place. No harness, no lanyard, no shock absorber, no backup line. If the strap broke, or if a snap hook opened under load, or if the pole itself gave way, there was nothing else. This was the standard for fall positioning in the telephone industry for most of the 20th century. OSHA didn't ban body belts from fall arrest systems until 1998. Before that, the leather strap was it. That's what he wore to get up the pole and stay there. Everything from here is what he carried to do the work. Number 10, leather tool pouch. Heavy-duty leather, open at the top, divided into stitch sections and loops. It hung from the right hip on the body belt. Every slot was arranged so the lineman could reach any tool with one hand without looking down. His other hand was on the pole or the cable at all times. Dropping a tool meant someone on the ground was in danger, and it meant a trip back down to retrieve it. The pouch was organized the same way every single day. Muscle memory. A lineman could pull his pliers, strip a wire, and tape a splice 30 feet up with one hand the same way most people tie their shoes with two. Number 9, adjustable wrench, 8 inches, usually a Crescent brand. The lineman used it for lag bolts, cross-arm hardware, guy wire clamps, and pole-mounted equipment. It was the only wrench he carried because an adjustable fit everything. Fixed wrenches would have meant carrying 5 or 6 tools to do the job of one, and 30 feet up a pole. Every ounce of weight mattered. The adjustable lived in a dedicated loop on the left side of the pouch, reachable by the left hand, while the right hand held the hardware in place. Number 8, Klein lineman's pliers. In 1857, a telegraph lineman walked into a blacksmith shop in Chicago with a broken pair of side-cutting pliers. The blacksmith was a German immigrant named Matthias Klein. He forged a new half, riveted it to the surviving half, and the lineman went back to work. A few days later, the lineman returned. The other original half had broken. Klein forged the second half, riveted them together, and the first complete pair of Klein pliers existed. That tool was made for one trade, the lineman's trade, and the company Matthias Klein started has been owned and operated by his family ever since. 5 generations, never sold, never taken public, still forging the same fundamental tool from American steel. In 1970, when a lineman reached for his pliers, the name stamped on the handle was the same name that was on the handle in 1857, Klein. Linemen didn't call them pliers, they called them Kleins. The tool and the name became the same word. These pliers cut wire, twisted splices, pulled cable, drove staples, bent hardware, and gripped anything that needed gripping. They were the first tool a man bought as an apprentice and the last tool he put down when he retired. Most of them were never replaced because most of them never broke. And here's what he did with them at the top of that pole. Number 7, diagonal cutters, shorter than the Kleins with a sharper angled cutting edge. The diagonal cutters made flush cuts on wire ends after a splice was twisted tight. The Kleins could cut wire, but they left a rough end. The diagonals left a clean cut that sat flat against the terminal without snagging or scratching. They hung next to the Kleins in the pouch, and between the 2 pairs of pliers, a lineman could handle 90% of the handwork at the top of a pole. Number 6, screwdrivers, 2 of them, both flat blade, one large, one small. The large one drove lag screws and cross-arm hardware. The small one worked the terminal screws on the binding post where individual telephone lines connected to the cable. In 1970, there were no Phillips head screws on a telephone pole. Everything was slotted. The screwdriver sat in leather sleeves, stitched into the back of the tool pouch, handles up, reachable by feel, without turning around. Number 5, Cable-Splicing Knife, a short, heavy knife with a sheep's foot blade, a blade that curves downward at the tip instead of tapering to a point. The shape was not an accident. Telephone cable in 1970 was a bundle of copper conductor pairs wrapped inside a lead sheath. The lineman had to score the lead sheathing and peel it back without cutting into the conductors underneath. A pointed blade would have sliced through the sheath and into the wires. The sheep's foot curve let him control the depth of every cut. He scored a ring around the cable, cracked the sheath along the score line, peeled back the lead, and exposed the pairs inside. Every splice started with this knife, and the quality of the cut determined whether the job held for 10 years or failed in the first rain. Number 4, wire strippers. Once the cable sheathing was open and the conductor pairs were exposed, each individual wire still had its own insulation, paper or cloth wrapping color-coded to identify the pair. The wire strippers removed that insulation without nicking the copper underneath. A nick in a copper conductor weakened it, and a weakened wire 30 feet up in a cable that might not be serviced again for years was a future failure. The strippers had calibrated notches in the jaws, sized to cut the insulation cleanly at the exact depth without reaching the metal. Number 3, electrician's tape. In 1970, this was friction tape, not the thin vinyl electrical tape sold today. Friction tape was a cloth tape coated in a sticky rubber compound. Thicker, tougher, and more weather-resistant than vinyl. After a splice was twisted tight with the Kleins, the lineman wrapped it in friction tape to insulate the bare copper and seal the connection from moisture. A bad tape job meant a short circuit or a noisy line the next time it rained. 30 feet up in wind with one hand wrapping a clean tight splice in tape was a skill that separated a journeyman from an apprentice. Number 2, torpedo level. A small level about 9 inches long, shaped like a torpedo with tapered ends so it fit into the pouch without catching on anything. Brass or aluminum body, 2 bubble vials. The lineman used it to set cross arms level on the pole. A cross arm is the horizontal wooden beam bolted to the pole that carries the wires. If the arm wasn't level, the wires wouldn't hang with even tension, and uneven tension caused sag, wear, and eventually failure. The torpedo level was the only precision instrument in the entire kit. Everything else was designed for cutting, gripping, and brute force. This one required the lineman to stop, hold still, and read a bubble. It was the one moment on the job where patience mattered more than strength. Number 1, butt set. The lineman's test telephone. Named for what it did. It butted in on a live telephone line, a handset with a mouthpiece, an earpiece, a rotary dial, and 2 test leads ending in alligator clips. The lineman clipped the leads onto a pair of binding posts at the terminal on top of the pole, and he was on the network. He could dial any number. He could call the central office to report a fault. He could ring the subscriber's phone to verify the line was working. He could flip to monitor mode and listen for noise, crosstalk, or dead silence on the circuit. One device, 2 alligator clips, and a lineman had direct access to the entire American switch telephone network from the top of a wooden pole. In 1970, this was the most important diagnostic tool in the Bell system, and it fit on a belt clip. No computer, no screen, no software, a rotary dial, and a pair of clips. The standard version was built by Western Electric, the manufacturing arm of AT&T. Black rubber housing, steel belt clip, built to survive a 30-foot drop to pavement. Every telephone lineman in America carried one, and most of them used it for things the phone company preferred not to know about. In 1970, one man could climb a pole with 15 tools on his belt and come back down having connected a family to every other telephone in the country. The copper's mostly gone now, the rotary dial is gone, the climbing spikes gave way to bucket trucks on most jobs. But the network that carries everything today, every call, every message, every signal, was built on wire that was strung, spliced, and tested by a man who carried his entire shop on his waist. 15 tools, 1 belt, 30 feet of air. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and watch the next video above.